through the centuries is a prophecy straight from the throne of God and delivered by angels. The promise that Jesus, who stepped through the supernatural veil into heaven 2,000 years ago, will return again as the victorious King. This revelation is not about a doomsday cataclysm, but the splendor of a restored heaven and earth without corruption. The sacred beauty of Eden will be fully renewed, and evil will be vanquished to never destroy this paradise again. Humans from every ethnicity, language, and country will be there exploring and developing this utopia while celebrating the goodness of God alongside the angels. The time of this promised hope is getting closer. Jesus is coming back. Yahweh has won. Eden will be reclaimed.
Well, everyone, welcome. I'm glad that you're here with us tonight in the room and online. So we're continuing on our series, the Epic of Eden, essentially. How the Bible is one story, start to finish. And tonight we're entering into part 10, the finale of it all. So this last year has been an awesome journey. I thought maybe you guys don't, but no, it's been fun going through the Bible. How it's one continuous story. How sacred space was broken at the beginning of the biblical story, and how Jesus is coming. He came to reclaim Eden. He's coming to do it in all of its glorious finality, and that's where we're going tonight. Over the next several weeks is how does this whole thing wrap up? So I'm glad that you're here. Now I'm sure over the last year I've said quite a few things that have maybe made some questions in your mind. I thought I should throw this out there. If you have questions about anything over the last year, come talk to me about it. I'd love to have further discussion. Maybe you throw out a question so great, it makes it into a future sermon, right? Because if you have that question, maybe somebody else does. So anyways, thanks for joining. We're going to continue on with Eden Reclaimed. If you want to follow along digitally, there's sermon notes you can do there. I got a couple links in there to some books that I recommend. So if you want to get those books, that's where they're at. So with that being said, I'm going to pray and then we're going to jump into tonight. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for your word. We thank you for the book of Revelation and all the excitement that's in there. God, I pray that as we spend some time looking at where things are going and how you're bringing everything to a great, glorious hope, God, that, you'd speak to us tonight and that we could have an encounter with you that gives us a hope for the future that is infectious to those around us. I pray that, everything that we do tonight would be honoring to you. In your name, amen. All right, so how many of you guys have ever wondered how it all ends, right? Has anybody ever, wondered how is everything going to end, in this life? Anybody? No? You do? I don't think that some of you guys are being honest with me by not saying I do, because if you look at Google searches, the trends of Google, you can pull up Google data. I don't know if you guys knew that or not. Or even go on TikTok, right? I don't know if you guys know this or not, but TikTok has it all solved. TikTok has everything figured out. If you go on there and just search, the apocalypse or Revelation or Rapture or something like that, man, everybody on TikTok has an opinion, and you can find it all out how it's going to go. But no, I think that there's actually an increase, at least in my lifetime, of people wondering how's it all going to end. And have any of you guys ever seen the guy? You got a bingo, awesome, well done. You got Jonathan was so quick at this. See if I get that to you. Oh, I hit Tyler in the face. Sorry, my bad. Jonathan was so quick at bingo this morning, tonight. Did you guys notice the center freebie space in there? I did that specifically for Jonathan. Well, for you guys, because Jonathan always wins. And so, he still got it first. So looking for one more winner tonight. So anyways, I think that there is a lot of angst in this world of people not feeling a little uneasy about the future. Would you guys agree with that? I talk to people from, I'm friends with people of all political spectrums, all over the world, all different ideas, all different theologies and religions. And there's a collective feeling that I get from everybody that something is wrong. Something's there's not a lot of hope in the future. And it's not just because Bitcoin isn't doing that great. It's it's more than that, right? Maybe one side of the political aisle's oh, I'm afraid that this side's going to get in. The other side's oh, I'm afraid that side's going to get in. And I'm afraid we're going to go to war with someone. I'm afraid that Russia's going to nuke somebody, and maybe Iran's going to do it. We all have this. How does it go on, right? I don't know. Maybe I'm just getting old and pessimistic, and I'm just not everything in the world is unicorns and Skittles, right? Yeah. Like where does it go? And I always, when you throw out the book of Revelation, right? Even the word revelation, there that invokes so many different emotions and all this. Like, have you guys all seen I'm not saying the guy, but like the guy that has like the billboard sign that's like, the apocalypse is here, repent now. Like, you guys know what I'm talking about, right? Like he usually has a megaphone. Wait, is that you? Oh, okay. So no, like yeah, but like I mean, there's that guy, right? That's like the end is here, right? Like, and then yet somehow it never seems to actually be here. It never seems to be the end. Now, one of these days you're going to be right. Like if I tell you it's going to rain tomorrow, enough days in a row, eventually, well, someday it's going to rain. But like we look back at Nostradamus, and we try to figure out like what did he predict, or what are like. There's just a lot of frankly weirdos in this realm, and so what do we do with the book of Revelation? Yeah. That is one thought, that there's disasters coming everywhere. In fact, that's actually a fairly prevalent view. And so I want to kind of maybe take this next several weeks to look at Revelation and what I think it does say and what I think it doesn't say. And you might actually be surprised. And so I'm gonna like let's just set aside the uneasiness for a minute if we can, and like look into, does God actually say what's going to happen, and if so, what does that look like? And so with that being said, I think that sometimes it kind of turns into like this idea of an ink blot. You guys know what an ink blot is, right? Like, and I ask you, what do you see in there? It looks like ribs, okay, like the McRib from like McDonald's that we don't even know if it's actually meat, but looks like lungs to you. Alien heads kissing. Okay, I could see that in there. Yeah, maybe a little bit. Maybe aliens wearing a Pope hat. Right? Like maybe there's some kidney beans on here. Right? Like you stare at the picture long enough and you're going to turn it into something. And I actually think that there's enough imagery in the book of Revelation that I see a lot of people that can kind of do the ink blot thing, right? Like take their economic, their political view, their whatever, their religious beliefs, and they can project their view into Revelation, find some obscure reference, and then that's how it's going to end up. And so there's some really, I'm going to argue, poor ways to read the book of Revelation. And so we're going to try and do our best to avoid that, but at the same time look at, like, as we come to the end of this series, how does it all actually not end but begin? Right? Like, how many guys would be surprised if I told you the book of Revelation actually isn't the end? It's actually the beginning, like the true beginning. And so, with so many views on the apocalypse, is it all valid? Now, when I say the term apocalypse, that's what Revelation is. Like the word that we get in our Bible that says revelation is actually the Greek word for apocalypse. And so the word apocalypse is kind of fascinating in our culture. They make movies out of it and stuff. This is what if you just Google apocalypse, and Oxford Languages, that's who does Google's dictionary, this is how they defined it. The complete final destruction of the world as described in the biblical book of Revelation. Boy, there's a lot in that. None of it's true. But that's how Oxford defines it. That apocalypse means it's synonymous with the complete and final destruction of the world. And that's what they think the book of Revelation is. They need to get some better authors to read from, I think. So, what's that? Maybe not. I don't know. Let's see. Why don't we look at what it is? So maybe this is true. Maybe it's not. And so I recognize right out of the gate, that there are a lot of opinions on Revelation. There are a lot of people who have written a lot of books about Revelation. There's a lot of people who've made a lot of money writing a lot of books about Revelation. There's a lot of times that people have predicted the end of the world on using the book of Revelation. I remember when I was not 7 years old, when I was not sure how old, I'd be 11, 1993. I remember feeling it like it was the end of the world because I heard people talking about the book of Revelation, a 7-year tribulation. We're at war with the Persian Gulf war at that point in time. In 1993, if you do 7 years math to that, which we'll get to in a little bit, like that equals the year 2000. Every 2,000 years, something significant happens. Like it's the end of the world. And I'm 11. I'm like, I'm not even married yet. Like that's what I was worried about, right? And as you can see, that didn't work out. So here's what it is. If you already have an idea about how it works, how Revelation goes, I'm gonna invite you to lovingly disagree with me. I'm going to invite you to just earnestly listen to what I think the text is saying, and I'm going to make my best case argument for what the text is saying. I invite you to just listen to a different opinion, even if you disagree with me, and we'll be friends, and we'll play ping pong or soccer or, I don't know, whatever else there is out there to do. Disc golf, we'll play disc golf. So, Royce, you can completely disagree with me, and I'll still play disc golf with you. Deal? All right, no. Yeah. So, like, that's right. And I'll preface this whole thing. There are a lot of really, really good Bible believing, Jesus loving theologians that fall all kinds of different areas on this, and that's okay. But I want to try and show you what I think the book is saying. So if you're worried about, if that's you, like if you think that like you got it figured out, I invite you to just listen. If you are worried about the future, I hope you actually find hope through this series. If you're not sure about Jesus, and like what I even think about that, man, I hope you find an encounter with the Lamb that we find in the book of Revelation. So with that being said, what is Revelation all about? So if I got 1 month, like I told somebody coming in tonight, I said, I'm going to preach through the book of Revelation tonight. I said, the whole book? I said, yeah. Just kidding. But I'm going to like take it over the next month, okay? So over the next month, so I'm going to highlight some things. Obviously, I can't get into the details, but we're going to take like the 30,000-foot view. And then later we can have all the fun discussions of what all the colors mean and the numbers and all these different things. But I want to try and make the best case scenario for the overarching view of it. So what is the book of Revelation about? Is it about, well, shout out one-word things. Tell me, what do you, and even if you agree with it or not, what do most people think or associate with the word revelation? If I'm going to do like a word association game. Throw out something. Eschatology. Okay, eschatology is a big word that probably a lot of people don't know. So what... Can you define it for me? No, just kidding. Eschatology is like, what do we think about the end things? Like, how does it all come to a conclusion? Where is it going? So that's a big theologian word to just say, like, how does God wrap everything up and start the new creation? So that's what eschatology means, okay? Other words. What's that? Defenestration? That is an amazing word I've never heard. Okay. I have honestly never associated that word with the book of Revelation, to throw somebody out of a window. Defenestration? Okay, all right. I can honestly say I did not see that one coming tonight. What's that? Poetry? Okay, there is a lot of poetry in Revelation. What's that? Tribulation? Okay. I'm surprised there's several that I expected to hear right out of the gate that I have not heard. Confusion. I'm with you there. Symbolism. What's that? Words to the church. The new Eden. That's in there. Usually in faith. Okay. It's got love. Usually I hear words like rapture, antichrist, tribulation, 4 horsemen, apocalypse, death and destruction, end of the world. Like, have any of you guys heard any of those terms associated with it? What's crazy is most people will associate those style words with the book, and the word rapture is actually never in the book. The word antichrist is never in the book. But the word lamb is in the book quite a lot, and nobody ever associates that with it. The word throne is in there quite a bit, and hardly anybody ever associates that. There's worship. In fact, that last song we sang before I came up here is like based out of Revelation. In fact, there's a lot of songs that are based out of Revelation. It's a really cool worship book. So, here's the thing I'm going to throw out. The big idea for tonight is that Revelation is actually about now. Revelation is important now. So I know some people that are like, oh, it doesn't matter yet, it's going to be then, or it doesn't matter yet, it's about back then, or it's somewhere else, or it's weird, it doesn't impact me. But actually, Revelation is a really cool book. Revelation has a lot to say for us today that actually impacts us. And so I want to throw out some perspectives that, yeah, I'll get to some like different views on the end times here in just a second. But there's a couple different ends that I see in church world with the book of Revelation. There's some that like are so confused by it and don't know what to do with it that they just totally avoid it. How many of you guys have ever sat through a place where like there's a teaching on Revelation? Okay, couple, not a ton. Like if you know what the lectionary is, where they like, where there's certain Bible texts that you read through or preach through, like it's not even in the lectionary. You know that? Like that's one end of the spectrum. We just avoid it because it's so strange, so weird, we don't know what to do with it. And then there's another end of the spectrum, which is like we fixate on it. Everything in our life revolves around it. I'm waking up every single day trying to connect the dots, trying to connect who's who, trying to figure out the Antichrist and why it's Obama or why it's Donald Trump or why it's like, I'm just picking on both sides here because so it's equal. Like why the COVID, why Nancy Pelosi, why the COVID vaccine is the mark of the beast, or why it's not the mark, maybe it's my cell phone's the mark of the beast. Like there was a while every time I got on Facebook, I would always see somebody commenting about like, where are we at in Revelations today? And I'm like, the fact that you said Revelations tells me right out of the gate you've never read the book. Because it's not Revelations, it's Revelation, one, not plural. So anyways, so Revelation has a lot for today, and we're going to get into that. So I want to give, though, like I said, this is like an intro to how do we even approach this book. Before I can jump in and start talking about what it is saying, we have to have some framework, some theology. Well, not really theology. Theology is word. We got to have some like good expositional, which means how do we study? How do we approach? Like, what is our framework for going into it? And so I want to first of all say, here is some of the major views. Now, there's so many different views out there that I can't get them all. So this is some of the major ones that are out there. And each of these has a million different sub-views of them. But here's just general big picture. So when I say different terms, you'll know what I mean. So what's often called the dispensational premillennial view. That just means there's a whole bunch of different times that God does different things with different people. Premillennial is based on a term that's off of 1,000 years that's mentioned in the end of Revelation. It's crazy because there are so many different millennial belief systems based out of a verse that mentions it one time in the whole Bible. Like there's theological frameworks and structures on where are you at on the millennial when there's like it's one verse. Isn't that crazy? Like there's a lot of verses in there on the lamb, but we don't have structures on what do you think about the slain lamb? But anyways, so what is often referred to as the dispensational premillennial view. Now this is probably the most common in modern Western America that I've found, and this is kind of an overview of it. There's a million different sub-overviews. But basically, AD 33, Jesus dies, he ascends up into heaven, and we're going on throughout life. And so we're in the present age, and time is just going forward, okay? So we're in the year 2023 now. If you're watching this online later, you're probably, not in 2023 anymore, unless you're in the next couple weeks. But anyway, so we're in the present age. We're moving forward. At some point in time, the people are going about their day, doing their things. At some point in time, a date unknown unless you find the one guy that can predict it. That's been predicted over and over and over wrongly again. Some point in time, there's going to be something called the rapture, which is basically like an evacuation of the people who follow Jesus. They're going to get sucked up to heaven, kind of like a beam me up Scotty type of thing. I actually don't know how that works. But anyways, one of my favorite bumper stickers is that in the case of rapture, this car is going to swerve while my mother-in-law grabs the wheel. I don't have that on my car. And if you're watching online, Anita, I am sorry. So anyways, I actually heard of airplane companies that wouldn't let two Christian pilots fly a plane at the same time, commercial airplanes, because they were afraid that if like the rapture happened, one of them would be gone. There had to be a non-Christian that could like fly the plane to land it safely. I'm like, it's crazy. Like some of the things people do with this. Okay, so anyway, so the rapture happens. They go get caught up with Jesus, and then there's the 7-year tribulation is often this view. Now, sometimes people think that this rapture will happen in the middle or at the end or different parts of the tribulation in this view. But then at that point in time, there's a person called the Antichrist that comes to power, reigns, probably out of the UN, maybe. I don't know. If it's not Obama, maybe it's somebody else. But and then at the end, Israel is restored to temple worship. At that point in time, there's like a geopolitical Israel that comes. There's often a third temple that happens, and there's like the temple sacrifices in Israel happens. During this whole point in time, there's a bunch of persecution of Christians that ramps up. Then Jesus comes back to he's judging during this whole thing, and so the book of Revelation unfolds during this point in time. There's scrolls and bowls and trumpets and stuff in the book. that describe various different things of war and diseases and stuff. And so this viewpoint holds that those things happen at this point in time, kind of judging the world and the abuse of the people of God during that point in time. And then there's going to be a point in time after that 7-year period where those that are dead Christians rise. The raptured church comes back, depending on the view you have. They all collect together, and then there's this battle in a place called Armageddon. And so, like, the whole nation comes together. They're going to, the Antichrist is trying to basically blow the whole thing up. So Jesus and the church come together. They fight at the Battle of Armageddon. And then the Antichrist is defeated. Then there's the millennium, the 1,000-year reign, where Jesus is going to reign as, I guess, president or king of the world. And then Satan has no power. He's not in hell or anything, but he's bound. He can't get out. And then at the end of 1,000 years, Satan is released, and then Jesus defeats him. And then there is the judgment that everybody who's a follower of Jesus goes to heaven, or the new Eden, the new sacred space, and everybody who doesn't belong to the Lamb, who wants to be part of the systems of this world, they go to the lake of fire. So this is, in a nutshell, this viewpoint. There's sometimes various different sub-views in that viewpoint. So post-millennial view, this one's getting a lot more common right now, because in the previous view, there's been a lot of people that have predicted the end of the world and the rapture, and they've been systematically wrong quite often. And so it's kind of, there's been some pushback to that. So the post-millennial view, this one is out there. So basically, again, starts the same way. Now, all of these, with the exception of one, end with kind of the same ballpark end. So the post-millennial view is we're going along in our present age. There's all the people. And then it's like this idea of like the world's going to get better and better. Like, as the church is more and more successful, the world's going to get better and better. And so it's like the goal of the church is to go Christianize the whole world. And eventually the world is in, like, wholeheartedly is going to become more Christianized. It's going to get better and better. And eventually we're going to get the earth to the place where Jesus comes back. And so as we get more and more Christians, like, this is during that 1,000-year reign, which again, they don't take as a literal 1,000 years. It's a symbolic 1,000 years. And then at the time of the world when everything is ready for Jesus, they prepared the way for him, and sometime in the future, he's going to come back down. At that point in time, there's going to be a resurrection of the dead, and the saints, they all get together. There's going to be the final judgment. Those who want to be with the Lamb, Jesus, they go to heaven, the new sacred space. Those who don't go to judgment. So this is kind of the post-millennial view. Like, we gotta go get the world ready for Jesus. And I will say too, how you understand the book of Revelation or your eschatology, the end times, like, really impacts the way you live on a day-to-day level. So this is one view that is taking a lot of stance. Then there's the amillennial view or amillennial view, which basically a meaning without or like non. Now people in the amillennial view don't believe that it's not, the word millennial isn't in the Bible. They just don't think it's a 1,000-year literal time frame. And it's, we'll get into that in a second. But basically, same thing, present age is going on, that we're in the time of Christ's rule now, and but the consummation is not yet. So, like, Jesus has already won. Jesus has already done it, but we're not in the final state yet. We're continuing on. And at some point in time, as we go through history, there's going to be the return of Christ. He comes back. And we're caught up with him in the air, and we usher in the King. He comes, and at that same point in time, the dead rise for a resurrection, and everybody faces judgment. As far as everybody gets their wish, you go to either be in the presence of the Lamb and the new creation, or you get judged and you go get quarantined outside of the new creation. That's the amillennial view. Another view that is... I didn't know whether to throw it in here or not, but I'll do it because the term preterist gets thrown around a lot, and nowadays it's actually catching steam. So there's different stances of it. A full or hyper preterist view. Preter means like it happened in the past, it's previous. So a full preterist view thinks that in AD 33, Jesus dies, he ascends to heaven. We're in the present age. But at AD 70, at the destruction of the temple, Jesus came back in the heavenly realms. Did everything at the destruction of the temple in AD 70. The book is entirely done. The book of Revelation is entirely done in a full preterist view. And so life is going on, and there's actually no literal physical return of Jesus. Life just goes on until, I guess, the earth stops spinning at whenever it just happens. And so at that point in time, when you die, it's not really even a resurrection of the dead or anything. When you die, you either go to heaven or you go to hell. So that's a full preterist view. Now there's such a thing as a partial preterist view, which takes kind of a mix of recognizing that Jesus has done a lot of revelation in the book of AD 70, and it's kind of mixed with the amillennial view that we're still waiting on Jesus to come back and do it. So that's kind of four of the more popular. There's another one called a historicist view, which is basically the book of Revelation is a time frame of the last 2,000 years, and there's charts and maps and stuff. Say all that to say there's a lot of different thoughts. There's a lot of different views. There's a lot of confusion over it, right? And so what do we do with it? Now, I love this quote by G.K. Chesterton. Though St. John the Evangelist, who wrote the book, saw many strange monsters in his vision, he saw no creature so wild as one of his own commentators. I think that actually catches the heart of where a lot of this goes. Now, there are what appears to be a lot of strange monsters in the book of Revelation, a lot of strange things, but there are some people who have totally turned it into something terrifying. So with that being said, are you guys ready to dig in? You're like, ready? We just got started. No. All right, so tonight, again, like I said, I want to relay the framework. Now, I love this, the very beginning of this book, Revelation 1 through 3. Revelation 3 has this amazing thing. It says, God blesses the one who reads the words of this prophecy to the church. So I'm going to bless you guys in like 2 seconds. And God blesses all who listen to its message. So if you listen to what I'm about ready to read, and then you obey what it says, for the time is near. So right out of the gate, I want to point out that there's blessings in this book, and not just for listening to it, but to obey what it says. Now think about some of those views that I just showed. How do you obey it for the church if you're not in a certain time frame that certain things happen? So I think right out of the gate, you can say if it's possible for the church globally and throughout time to be able to listen and obey what's in this book, then maybe we need to have a bigger picture of it. So with that, there's blessings to listen and obey, but I think you could also make the case that there's negative things if you don't obey. Now, if you remember after Jesus died and he resurrected, he's walking on the road to Emmaus with 2 different people, and they don't recognize him right out of the gate. He makes this comment to them when they're trying to figure out what's all happening. This is in the book of Luke. Jesus said to them, "You foolish people, you find it so hard to believe all that the prophets wrote in scriptures." So Jesus, I think you can make the case that Jesus says, like, hey, there's a blessing if you listen and follow and obey it. To obey it, you got to understand it. But if you don't, or you disbelieve it, it's actually kind of foolish, right? So with that being said, it's kind of important to understand what the book of Revelation is about. So as we get into this, we have to understand what kind of literature are we reading, right? Because you read poems different than you read history. Like you wouldn't read like the Chronicles of Narnia, if you know that, or Lord of the Rings. You wouldn't read that like you would like a historian on Rome, right? Like you would read those, approach them differently. And so we have to understand, what are we reading? Well, first of all, he says it's an apocalypse. So Revelation 1 through 3 is the verses I'm going to focus on tonight, because there's a lot in there. And those 3 verses set the stage for the whole thing. It says right out of the gate, Revelation 1, this is a revelation or an apocalypse from Jesus Christ, which God gave him to show his servants the events that must soon take place, right? So he's saying it's an apocalypse right out of the gate. So what is an apocalypse? Is it the end of the world like Google says, or is it something different? An apocalyptic literature in Jewish writing, which is what this is a revealing or a teaching of just what's going on in this behind the scenes in the heavenly realms, right? Like what's going on and the book of Revelation, as you start going through it, isn't so much about a doomsday prophecy, I don't think, as it is like it's a worship anthem for the people who follow the Lamb. And if you start looking at how many times you see the words like lamb and throne and worship and singing, like you'll start seeing a completely different picture of Revelation. You'll start seeing a completely different thing. Like so it's actually it's a worship pattern. It's a worship manifesto, so to speak. It's how does the church proceed in the age we're in? So the question becomes, is the book of Revelation, is it literal or is it symbolic? Now, there's some people who think everything in the book of Revelation is literal, it can't be symbolic, right? Unless it can't be literal, then you make it symbolic. So we try and keep it as literal as we can, and if we have to go symbolic, then we'll go symbolic. For example, there's some people that will think, like later on you read about these locusts that are flying and they're stinging things, and people will try, well, that's probably like a Black Hawk helicopter, right? So they try to make symbols fit things. But other than that, like the 1,000 years, that's literal 1,000 years. Or the 666 on somebody's head, the mark of the beast, that's literal, right? So we try to make everything as literal as we can. We turn the term 7 into literal, but unless we can't figure out how there's like locusts that are stinging, that flying around with like demon heads and stuff, then that's probably a Black Hawk helicopter. So even the most literalist interpretation will be symbolic somewhere. So one approach is you be as literal as you can unless you're forced to be symbolic. I think there's another option, though, which is you're as symbolic as you can unless you're forced to be literal. Right? Now the question becomes, which one do we go with? Wouldn't it be awesome if we could ask John what he meant? Wouldn't it be great if John gave us some sort of clues? Well, I think he does. But to set the stage for this, I want to show you this picture right here. This is a political cartoon from like the 1940s, right? So Anne Mergen did this in like the newspaper in 1940 before like World War II's taking off. And so if you don't know what's going on, this is Dr. Goebbels, or Joseph Goebbels. He was the Nazi propagandist dude. He just went on all the time and promoted Nazi propaganda and said rhetoric and all kinds of things like that. And so she made this cartoon showing that this plane that's taking off, the Nazi plane that's flying on name calling and lies, it's being powered by what Goebbels is saying, right? And all the hot air that's coming out of his mouth. And while it's just words, right? Like sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Like while it's just words coming out, the words, the rhetoric is actually flying the whole Nazi machine. Now, we kind of recognize, like, I don't think she actually thought he was just a head attached to the rear end of an airplane, right? Like, literally, that picture doesn't work. But literally, she meant to say something, right? There is definitely something literal in that symbolism. And so I think John's trying to do the same thing. And so if we could ask John a question on how to interpret it, and he could answer it, I think it would be fairly helpful in knowing how do we approach the whole book. And so with that being said, Revelation 1 through 3, I think we can actually do that same thing. Now, this here is, I'll put the text up here. Now, the words that are highlighted in yellow, pay attention to them because there's something significant about them, okay? And if you take the Greek phrase that gets translated as those yellow things, that's what they are. So this is a specific Greek phrase, all right? So in the book, it says, this is a revelation from Jesus Christ, which God gave him to show his servants the events that must soon take place. He sent an angel to present this revelation to his servant John, who faithfully reported everything he saw. This is his report of the word of God and the testimony of Jesus Christ. God blesses the one who reads the words of this prophecy into the church, and he blesses all who listen to its message and obey what it says, for the time is near. So you saw all those words that I highlighted, right? So going back here, this is a revelation God gave to him to show events that must soon take place, present, and then time and near, right? So there's a lot of words that are highlighted right there in Greek. Now, you're like, big deal. Good job. You know how the highlighter works. What do we do with that? Well, did you know that there's places where the Bible uses those same words? Like if you take the Hebrew meaning of those words, and especially the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Old Testament that was written in Hebrew, there's a place where you can actually look at those words that are used somewhere else in the Bible. In fact, if you take the combination of those, how many places do you think that combination is used in the Bible outside of this passage? Any guesses? Used once, right? Like, so John is trying to, in the very opening, he's using phrasing that's used only one other time in the Bible anywhere to draw your mind to, hey, it's the same type of thing. And this is actually where we get the key of how to interpret the whole book. Where that's taken from is the book of Daniel. So Daniel 2:8. So what's going on here is Daniel, King Nebuchadnezzar has a dream. If you remember the dream, it's about this big statue made of different things. And there's a stone that comes out of the mountain that's not cut by human hands. It comes down and it destroys the statue. And the king's trying to figure out what his dream means. And he's asking the wise men to come tell him what the dream is. And so he says to the wise men, hey, come tell me not just what it means, but tell me what my dream was, so I know you're telling me the truth about the meaning. And nobody can do it, so he's going to kill all the wise men. And then Daniel's like, hey, wait, I can do it. And so he does it. So this is Daniel giving that. So that's the setup for this. And so he's talking about that dream, the statue with the different metals and different things, and then the stone that comes down. But there is a God in heaven who reveals secrets and has shown King Nebuchadnezzar what will happen in the future. Now I will tell you what your dream and the visions you saw as you lay on your bed. While your majesty was sleeping, you dreamed about coming events. He who reveals secrets has shown you what is going to happen. And then verse 45, the great God was showing the king what will happen in the future. The dream is true, and its meaning is certain. So that is the only other place in the Bible where that language is used. Like John is copying this. So what's significant about that dream is there isn't a literal statue. There isn't a literal stone. If you go into the book of Daniel, what's being taught is that this statue represents 4 different kingdoms. One of them is Babylon. And then there's a stone that comes and destroys all the kingdoms, which is the coming Jesus, right? And so it's a highly symbolic dream that has literal meaning. So I think right out of the gate, John is telling you this book should be taken as symbolic as can. And now it has real meaning behind it, but take it symbolically unless you're forced to take it literally. And so that's where the book takes off with. The book is actually, it's a worship anthem full of great hope. And we're going to, in the next several weeks, look at, I think there's 3 main movements at the end of Revelation that kind of summarize where it's going. There's 3 main things that are going on, but the book, it's actually a worship anthem full of great hope. And when you realize what the book is calling us to do, it's a message to the churches in, it's a message that's timeless to the churches across the thing. And the big message of the book is the Lamb wins. Babylon loses, right? Like, that's what the book is about. Are you on Team Babylon or are you on Team Lamb? Are you with the dragon and aligning with his cohort? Or are you under the slain lamb? That's what the book is about. Right? If you remember, was it Team Edward or Team Jacob, right? Are you Team Jacob? Are you Team Edward? And which one should Bella go with back in the Twilight series? And then you realize she shouldn't be with either one of them. But like, yeah, that's the book of Revelation. Are you Team Lamb or are you Team Dragon? Are you team like kingdom of heaven? Or are you the team kingdom of this earth, Babylon? Right? So it's actually the book of Revelation is to encourage the church then, in the past, now, and in the future to not marry Babylon. It's to recognize the difference in the kingdoms and how do you have a filter to know how to go with it. And so Babylon's actually not a specific kingdom that's coming in the future, but it's actually all kingdoms of this world, right? Like all kingdoms can have symptoms of being Babylon. And we're going to get into that next week. And so here's the thing I want to kind of frame this whole conversation with over the next several weeks is that the book of Revelation is not a code to be solved. It's actually a lens to look through. There are people that try to solve every little bit and draw connections, who's who, and how does it all fit together, and where does this political event happen, and this nuclear bomb happen, and nobody will ever talk about the fact that maybe, what about like the atomic bomb that America dropped in Japan? The 2 of them, like, where does that fit in? Or is it just the nuke that Russia sets off? Like, how does this fit? Like, it's not a code to be solved. It's not a Rubik's Cube. It's not like trying to pull all these things together. It's a lens to look through to show you the war between the Lamb and Babylon. But the Lamb wins. And so what team are you on? How do you identify the teams? How do you know which one's which? And actually, I think that the book of Revelation has a lot to say to the American church. It has a lot of calling out for the American church to do. But what is the ultimate hope? The ultimate hope is the fact that the Lamb wins. And so, as we go looking at the 3 main movements over the next several weeks about this, here's how I want us to look at the thing. It's symbolic, but it's very literal. The literal interpretation is what John meant it to symbolically say. And it has importance for us. It has a challenge for us to check our allegiance. Who do we pledge allegiance to? Right? Like, where does that go? Where are we on Team Lamb or are we on Team Dragon? And what does that mean for the church? So, if you're a follower of Christ, the message in the book of Revelation that we're going to get to over the next several weeks is that the way of the Lamb is being a faithful witness in Babylon. Like, this is how it starts practically working out. Babylon is real. By the way, you probably live in it, whether you realize it or not. There are antichrists that are here. And like, if you're not on Team Lamb, you're on Team Babylon. Only 2 teams in the game, right? So what is the message? It's that if you're on Team Lamb, be a faithful witness while you're in Babylon. If you're on Team Babylon, man, you might want to evaluate what team you're on, because all it can bring is what Babylon can bring, which is destruction. And so Babylon, the many Babylons throughout history that we're going to look at throughout the book, and what Babylons do, like, yeah, that's not the team to be on. It's what Jesus is doing. And so the hope that we have and the new Eden that's coming, the new sacred space that's coming, is in the fact that the Lamb won. The Lamb is the conquering king. The Lamb is setting all things right. And there's actually great hope. There's great encouragement in the book of Revelation when we take off the doomsday prophecy lens. It's amazing what you actually see. Now, there is some crazy stuff in there, and we're going to get into that next week. But the call is that, like, Babylon needs to get out of the church, but the church needs to be a faithful witness in Babylon, right? Like, there's too much Rome in the church and not enough church in Rome. That's kind of the idea it's going to. So Rome is Babylon, but it's more than Babylon's more than just Rome. It's the nations of this world against the kingdom of the Lamb, which is eternal. So I'm excited about the next several weeks. If you come back next week, I'll tell you the date that the rapture's happening. And so you want to make sure you don't miss that. I'm pretty confident I have the date of the rapture down, and I will reveal it next week. So with that being said, yeah, let's pray. Jesus, we thank you for your word. We thank you for the hope that's there. We thank you for the fact that you do win. Babylon loses. So God, I pray that we would be faithful followers of you, that we would be able to recognize Babylon when we're pledging allegiance in our thought and actions to Babylon, when we're being loyal to Babylon, even when it's so subtle we don't even realize we're doing it. God, I pray that we would have the lens that the Lamb has so we can see what we're doing on which side. So God, I pray that your church would be faithful in following the way of the Lamb and being faithful witnesses in the Babylon they're in. And I pray that that would be true of renewal, that we would be faithful witnesses in the Babylon we are in, pointing people to Team Lamb. Because, Jesus, it's amazing what you're doing and the hope that you have and the new creation that you are bringing. So, Jesus, I pray that as a church we would be faithful with the mission you've called us to do, which is to take up the way of the Lamb. We ask this in your holy, precious name. Amen.